I would like to call the September 9th, 2021 regular board meeting to order at 6:00 p.m. Tommy Gartrell will have our invocation. Would you please stand?
Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day, for this opportunity to come together and conduct school business to the benefit of our community and our children. Bless our staff, students, and families at this trying time in our community, and please, Lord, give us the wisdom and guidance to make it through successfully each day in this very trying environment. In God's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Mr. Smith will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item is the approval of the agenda. Mr. Young, do you have any amendments to our agenda?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Smith makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gartrell made the second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 5-0. The motion has been approved. The agenda has been approved. The next item is public participation. Mr. Young, have we received any requests for public participation for this board meeting?
We have not, Madam Chair.
The next item is Superintendent Reports. The first item is digital learning in Pickens County School System, and the topic is itsLearning. Mr. Young?
Thank you, Board. We thought that it would be appropriate at this point to give you guys a little presentation from each of our principals in our buildings on itsLearning and how they're using that, so that you guys would have a better picture of how that's going as we work through this COVID and the quarantining and the isolations that it involves. So we're going to have our principals who are back there. The elementaries, they usually, Corey, are you traveling with the elementaries this evening?
Yes, sir.
There is at grade levels in the buildings like the elementary and Corey at JMS, there's a lot of similarities. So these guys are going to present their information. Who drew the short stick? And Ms. Halco. Ms. Halco, all right.
We are all going to just chime in here, though. Thank you for letting us speak with you about how we're using itsLearning, and we're all very similar in the way that we use it. We try really hard to coordinate and work together in truly most everything we do. So we're using itsLearning very similarly, and we have grown a lot with it. And we can see that we've learned from areas that we needed to grow in, and I think we are really on the right track with it now. It is just part of our daily use in the classroom. So basically we have 3 scenarios that we are looking at when we use itsLearning. One is when we are completely face-to-face with students and teachers in the classroom. The other scenario, of course, is when we have small pockets of students having to be quarantined. It might be 1 or 2 out of a classroom, it could be 3 or 4, it could be 10 out of a classroom. And then there's a situation where it could be an entire classroom or even a school closure if at any point in the year we have to face that. So with all of that in mind, what we've started doing this year is itsLearning has just become part of our daily routine in the classroom. And in the elementary school, it lends itself really well because, you know, we work with small groups in elementary schools. So itsLearning has just become part of, and it's just one of the independent stations that the students rotate through. So while the teacher is working with a small group, and if we are in a classroom that has a para in it, the para will have a small group as well. And then the students that are working independently, one of their independent stations is on itsLearning. So they're logging in every day, they know how to log in, they know how to find their assignments. And it would be a daily routine, such as they might do their interactive spiral. That's something that they used to do on paper pencil. Well, now they do it on itsLearning. They may access one of the computer programs that we have, like Dreambox or iRead, iExcel. Some of those they would go to it through itsLearning. Some of the classrooms actually have their daily agenda on itsLearning. So they log into itsLearning to see their daily agendas, what they need to work through during their independent rotation stations. So that's how they're used when they're face-to-face sitting in the classroom. They're receiving whole group instruction from the teacher. Then they break into small groups. So while they're not with the teacher, they are working on one of their independent rotation stations is through itsLearning. Then the other scenario is when groups have to go out, when you might have, one or two sit home, or you may have, like I said, a group of up to, 6, 7 sit home. We're in a situation now where we do have the shorter quarantine as an option for parents. So if they choose the shorter quarantine, oftentimes if a weekend's thrown in there, they may just truly be missing, 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 days if they choose that shorter quarantine. Now, if they choose the longer quarantine, it could be up to 10 days, but of course you have a weekend thrown in there also. So that is really treated almost as if a child has, if they've had the flu, or in the elementary schools, we oftentimes deal with students out having their tonsils removed, or, just different situations where a child might be out for a week or so of school. And in a situation like that, the teachers oftentimes then just send home the packet, not really a packet, just like the schoolwork. When you say my child's going to be out of school for 2 or 3 days, can you send some work home for them? Excuse me, so the teachers will send home that work. Oftentimes, if the child is still at school and we're sending them home, they will just take it with them. If it has happened after school, a lot of times then we will just have it at the front desk. Parents will stop by the school, pick it up, or they'll ask us to send it home with a sibling. So they have the school work that they are doing, that's just been sent home. But then additionally, they work on the itsLearning, like what they would have been doing in their independent stations also. It's not a problem for the children because they're just used to doing that every day in the classroom. So they have the independent station work on itsLearning, and then just the school work also that they would have done more in groups that they have sent home with the student. Then we get to the biggie. What will happen if we have to close, and if we have a whole group or a whole grade level that has to go home? In that situation, the students are very familiar with itsLearning. They have been using it every day, all year. They're very familiar with it, but more lessons now are put into itsLearning. And it is not just that independent daily spiral accessing their computer program. So they will still have that. But in addition to that, teachers will be holding live meets. And they'll record those live meets because we know at the elementary level, sometimes they're not always able to get in the live meet. Sometimes they're not doing that until after the parents get home from work in the evening. So they'll have live meets where the teacher's actually, she's teaching lessons. She's teaching on there now. She's presenting new content on there. So, but they know how to use the program. So now it's just the lessons put in itsLearning is now the full day's lessons. They'll have the small group lessons in there, and they will have, the teacher actually teaching the lessons and holding Google Meets with them, but recording those for the kids that can't be in the Google Meets. One thing about itsLearning is it also has a messaging feature to where kids can, when they're out, they can respond and ask the question, not respond, so they can ask questions, like send an email, but through itsLearning to the teacher to address any questions or problems that they're having with it. So that's how we're using it in the elementary school. I mean, I feel we've gotten really good positive feedback from the Digital Learning Day, and I think everyone feels comfortable with it, especially like in the elementary schools now. We're one-to-one Chrome devices, kindergarten all the way up. So that's just part of their daily routine is using itsLearning. Do you want to add anything?
How challenging is it? Like with kindergartners who are just learning to read, I would assume they'd have to have a lot more parental help or older sibling or caregiver of some help.
They do. They have to have, of course, the parents are there with them, because, with the little kindergartners, now the parents can get them logged in and go about their business, if they are there in their home. And the students, then they can work through it because they're, like I said, they're used to doing that in their classrooms. But if it is and I have had some children that when we were at the end of the school year, last year one time we were closed down, the child went to work with their parent. And the parent could kind of help them, there, but then we also realized that there's some families that are not in that position and they cannot do that. So we are aware of that. We completely understand that we have families in multiple situations. So that's where we're getting them used to it, but we also know that we have to limit the assignments because they may be doing that afternoon or that night when their parents get home, when they get home from work.
So when they log into the device, it automatically shows that they participated in something.
Yes,
during the day.
it tracks the amount of time that they're on, that they've spent on it. It tracks actually the time that they spend on their active versus the time they've just had it on. So yes, we get reports on that.
And if they're in a situation where they just can't do it or just won't do it, is there some accountability there? How strictly is that?
Yes, that's one of the things that I did not mention that I had down in my notes to mention is that if we do have to close, and I know that Marla's just kind of dealt with this with a fourth grade group at her school, we send out those expectations beforehand. We send those out. Of course, we've already talked to the students about them. As of last year and this year, I mean, grades count. But now, of course, in kindergarten, we don't really give grades anyway, but at the same time, we are, monitoring their progress toward the standards. So, they are held accountable for, the work that is on there. It is expected to be completed and some of it is for a grade.
I will just add, just because it was my fourth grade, I don't mind adding this, that because it was at my school, that what my teachers did if they had difficulty completing things, because there are certain situations where they are having difficulty at home, or if they're not in front of the computer or things like that, if they don't have help at home, they've given that opportunity when they come back to school to get that one-on-one help, or have them have that opportunity at school to get that time to get those assignments completed or get that help that they need when they come back to school. So there is some time at school when they come back to get that help.
Well, I'm just thinking about children that would have been like Tommy Gartrell when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I certainly was not the most studious child in the world.
We have people that help with Tommy Gartrells.
We do.
It would have been like pulling teeth to get me to do that
We
when I
do.
could be fishing
We
or
do.
something else.
We do, and so we have that built into the time when they do come back. So they're set up to do that. But we had excellent participation, I will tell you that, when we did close down, unfortunately, the 4th grade most recently, and the teachers were, they actually attributed it to the expectations that were sent out first. The parents were very appreciative of that. They knew what to expect. They knew what was happening every day. They had Google Meets. They had live Google Meets set up every day, and the teachers were on, and they had different things set up, and they knew what was coming. They knew what was coming for each child, and they made it work. They did a great job with it.
And I'd like to say, kind of just a thank you for the itsLearning. We started this in 2020 March when we had to go home, and I had a kindergartner, a 5th grader, a 9th grader, and an 11th grader. And I was home doing my job as well, so I can feel with those parents. It was difficult, but when we got when y'all allowed us to purchase itsLearning, it helped as a parent. I mean, my 2nd grader the other day in the digital learning day, she got on it, had 5 or 6 things to do in ELA, 5 or 6 things to do in math, and she had 2 Google Meets, and I just think it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and I appreciate it. And we did have lots of participation on the digital learning day. I kind of tallied my teachers, and I got the percentages of how many got on, and in kindergarten I had a class with 95%, and then I asked them to do the itsLearning assignments, who did those, and then who actually did the Google Meets, and there's a difference there, but the assignments in one class was 95%, 80%, 50%, 50%, 50%, so I thought that was an overall about 62%, and that was the assignments themselves in itsLearning, and that was kindergarten, and then the Google Meets was up there at 61% after I tallied them all, and that was kindergarten. And of course it kind of, 2nd grade was probably my highest with 73, and 3rd grade I had about 75% on the meets and about 50 on the the other. So I think we had a pretty good turnout.
And I think at Jasper Middle School, you know, our kids are older, more mature, so we do a little bit more as far as the assignments being posted to itsLearning. And really, while it's unfortunate to have any kids quarantine or anything like that, it really gives that seamless approach to, while your child is missing school, they're not necessarily missing work. So when they do come back, they have just, you know, 2 weeks worth of assignments that they have to complete on their time in addition to what's there. Gives them a chance to stay up to date with their classwork and coursework. So, and like Ms. Hall said, thank you for allowing us to have this. It seems to be kind of that centralized hub to keep kids from falling behind. So.
Well, I really like that y'all are using it in the classrooms to where the kids are very familiar with it, so it is a very seamless change. And if the community doesn't watch any other part of this meeting, I wish they'd see this, to see that it is working, people are involved, and to help us a little bit more and help you and the kids to be involved with it.
I know a couple of you mentioned about setting up the Google Meets or whatever so the teacher can have that face-to-face interaction still with the students. But I think in both cases it was mainly when like a whole class was out or something. Especially in the situation, I feel like if you have 1 or 2 or a handful of students in quarantine or something, and the majority of class in person, our teachers, are they still kind of making that contact every day for those students quarantined, or is there a opportunity for, like, you know, a 4th grade math teacher, or if one 4th grade teacher is available this period of time, if you have questions or concerns, you know, you can check in on Google Meet or whatever. You know, is there those options and opportunities?
I don't know that we would say we've got a live link constantly, but the teachers are checking on the students and reaching out. If anyone reaches out for help or assistance, the teacher definitely makes time to address those needs and concerns.
And the students are so well with itsLearning, they communicate with the teachers through that too. They do.
There isn't a time, I mean, we have not had a time though where, you know, like if they're out for that shorter period of time, like that 2 or 3, 4 day period of time, that they reach out to do a Google Meet. Now they will reach out just, you know, through email or call the parent, you know, just checking in. And also, you know, during this time also, we've talked about the live Google Meets, but we still have, you know, emails with parents, phone conferences, even just, you know, virtual conferences, parent conferences, all that still goes on, just as, you know, if it was at school and a conference is needed because, you know, well, Johnny's not doing his homework and not doing his work, you know, the teacher's still reaching out to the parent. So I've noticed, you know, he hasn't logged on, is there anything we can do to help, is there, you know, so I mean, you still have that back and forth communication with the teachers and in our grade level, the parents, you know, instead of reaching out really to the students.
Any other questions for this group?
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Flat. Come on down. Dr. Flat will talk to you a little bit about itsLearning at the junior high.
Hey, good evening, guys. Hope y'all are doing well. I don't know that there's a lot more to add over what they just talked about with you, because essentially the format in which it works is the same at every level. I know for us, we were extremely adept at Google Classroom before we even hit the pandemic, so all the teachers did that. So working in one of these mediums was not anything different. It was just learning how the bells and whistles of this one worked. So for us, you know, what I'd say we gained most for our community is that it's a unified presentation K through 12 now, and that they can see it all essentially interacts the same way. There's differences to the grade levels because of what's available within it, but otherwise it's the same. And I've got, like Stephanie, a bunch of dang kids, so there's a bunch of them. I see all their different stuff that's in there, so I know how to kind of navigate my way through it. And I've learned way more as a parent than what I do in the classrooms with the teachers, because I look just for certain things with the teachers, but as a parent I have to navigate in and see different things. So that for me has been the greatest part, is the unification of they're all sort of using the same thing. But for us, it's employed much in the same way they describe. It is a place for parents to find weekly lesson plans that are posted within that. It is a place for the students to see the daily schedule and what's going to go on within the class. It is a medium where they can go in and actually do assignments therein, either homework or classwork, and is a way to use assessments to be done in the system as well. So it's used throughout the day, the whole time. As far as the distance learning, I think we have led the charge of most people the whole time having to do this. So the teachers have gotten really good at being able to handle kids in class, that virtual sense at that time. They have some other times set up that they work with them if the kid needs to do something different. As long as it's working as a two-way street, we get it accomplished. When we don't get the participation on the back side of it, then it wouldn't matter what system we had, it's not going to be effective. So it's worked very well for that. But I would say that throw the pandemic out the window, having an LMS is critical for all the different things that we have to do. It doesn't matter if it's learning or a different one, you have to have something, because we can't operate anymore without that sort of necessity. It makes all the different things that we deal with students and homebound so much easier to get information conveyed, and just quirky situations that we as administrators have to deal with and work with families on. It allows us some flexibility to work within. So we appreciate having it. Thank you for that. Do y'all have any questions?
This, I guess, would apply to all, but I just thought of the question. Is there grading incorporated within itsLearning? I understand maybe work they do in the classroom, not, but is there a way to
Mainly it's built into through other programs, but it can house things in USA Test Prep. It can house things like in Google Forms you can use to grade within there. So it does work. Assessments can be set up in there. It's not your major test or anything you're finding in there, but they can link into it that way.
And that can be viewed from the parent or the student perspective on their end?
Depends on how the test works. They can time lock those. Those can only be done at certain times. That all depends. Yeah, things can be seen. But those things usually have to be set there. You know, they're going to do that test at this time. That's when the window opens. They do it then. Does that make sense?
What kind of response did you get on the last Friday? Did you get a pretty good participation from?
Yeah. Mixed.
That's a tough age.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You mentioned fishing. I'm sure a lot of people went fishing the other day. So, you know, we had really, really good participation at different waves. Specifically, I would say the best participation we had was in 2020 when we dealt with it, the way we worked through. I don't have those numbers in front of me. And I did not tally what we got on Friday, but it is more of our teachers, the teachers at the level I work with are by far the most talented I've ever seen in motivation. And having been in a high school setting most of my career, I find that they have to work the hardest because they don't have graduation as a carrot yet to hold in front of a student. So their ability to build relationships with these kids is second to none at a very, very difficult age for most students at that time. So it was hit or miss, Mr. Gartrell. So we got some were really good and came in and did everything. Some didn't do anything.
Well, it's unfortunate at the state level from my onset there was a decision made and kind of made it an uphill battle for all of us for the last 2.5 years, really.
It's nothing gets easy on this front right now. So.
All right, thank you, Dr. Flatt.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Wallace from the high school.
Good evening, board. I gave you a little handout there with just a few details about how we use itsLearning, kind of its purpose. A lot of questions that I'm sure you were probably going to ask have already been asked, like Dr. Flatt said. But I do want to say my approach to getting you guys some information, I kind of went toward the teachers' feedback approach and let them kind of tell me their boots on the ground response to this. And it's just so scattered, I guess, all over the place for us from a high school perspective because of so many different levels of classes and so many different areas of focus that we go into. So as y'all know, we're on a 4x4 block, and so each kid has four periods a day. So unlike the elementary setting where they may spend most of their time or the majority of their time with one group of kids, our teachers, are 3 groups of kids per day. And so last week did give us a great opportunity to try this out and make sure everybody was on board. And of course, they've been preparing up to that as well. Just like all the principals said before me, we have an obligation if we have some program like this that we know is going to be needed at some point in some capacity to make sure they're educated and informed and empowered with the knowledge to be able to operate that at home. Now, if they actually do that or not, we only have so much authority over that. So that's where we need, parents and guardians, people at home helping out, and making it important and making it a focus too. So it kind of takes, of course, everybody, and the students, some have different levels of motivation than others and have different interest levels than others. Some students, for us, it's not like, well, they either participated or they didn't. Sometimes they pick and choose what class they participated in because maybe they don't like math as well, but they love their science class. And so I know we always pick on math, but it seems like that's an area where kids really struggle. And, if it becomes struggle, they sometimes are less likely to be I guess engaged and interested. So overall, working very well for us, for our needs. We do have some areas that we would like to address. I think probably some more training, like I put down there, would be an area that I would like to see maybe our teachers that aren't as comfortable. Some teachers have taken it and just run with it, and we've had them over the last year and a half to actually do some peer coaching and go in and do some demonstrating and have some sessions with people that want to learn more. But I think there's some more, as Dr. Flatt put it, maybe bells and whistles that we could dive further into. But also put in there, more isn't always better. I think sometimes with these systems you could get too complicated and put too much out there and overwhelm people. And also, again, it depends on what the student's level of capability is. Also put in there, we have to constantly think about serving all levels of students and students with exceptionalities and think about IEPs and 504s and all that, especially when we start talking about a student being on there for 10 days or something. In our world, 10 days is a major, part of their class because, we only have 18 weeks in the class. So it definitely hits a little harder when a student has to be out for us because there's less time for them to catch up. And that's just the nature of 4x4 block. Trade-off, of course, is you don't have as many classes at a time. So one of the strengths I thought was really well put was down there where under the teacher feedback is the teacher has multiple preps within a single class. So she has 2 or 3 classes within one class to make sure we get all the students through their pathway. And she just gave the feedback of, it is challenging. It's challenging no matter what. But I thought it was interesting. She said it was a true godsend to have a system in place. And so we came out of Google Classroom originally when we started this, before we had this. And there's some really positive things about Google Classroom in comparison to this, but there's just a few more things that this program does. And some people like that and some people don't like it as much. So she just went on to say, I provide very detailed instructions on what section needs to be, or what section needs to accomplish in class, and clarifying the concepts that I noted need to be mentioned from the day before, and then attach the resources that are needed, modifications to the lesson for those who are quarantined or absent. And so this is a very good teacher that does a great job for us. And also got some feedback from teachers that came from other counties prior to coming here this year, had taught in other counties. So to get some feedback from them in regards to how Cherokee does it or how Forsyth does it in a bigger system, it was interesting to hear some of that feedback. So, I think we're on the right track, and, there's no magic solution out there that everybody uses. If there was a perfect one, I think everybody would be using that and nobody would be using others, right? So I think it's good for our needs. I think we probably need to put a little more focus on making sure our students have all the knowledge they need and maybe spend a little bit more time. We're just hesitant at the high school level because it clips along so fast, and then you have to take time to spend out of the content to spend on a program to make sure they have this information, which we know is time well spent, but then the teacher's sitting there trying to balance, so do I cut into my content time in order to make sure they have time to learn this program? So, that's always a balancing act, but overall it does fit our needs, and we definitely rely on it for homebound kids, for quarantine kids, isolation, just a myriad of things like Dr. Flatt mentioned. There's different situations we try to work with people on, and it's definitely got its pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses. And I need to mention a weakness too, because I mentioned a strength, but I think the one here that says the program is excellent, however, it can be frustrating if there's too much information on there. If a teacher really tries to put everything on there and it's overwhelming, if it's hard to find or a kid gets frustrated, a lot of times they just shut down and they're not going to take the time to go through all the information. So, sometimes less is more, and I think that's what we got to take out of this as we go and look at this a little further, especially if we're going to have to rely on it on a larger scale. We got to make sure that we're a little more consistent, because some teachers go way above and beyond, and then some teachers are not as comfortable as others. So, the student, while we're using the same platform, there's a lot of variation within that platform, and so we've got to make sure what they're seeing for every class is as consistent as possible. So, overall, my teacher's working really hard. I know it's more work to serve kids digitally and in person, and pretty much every teacher in my school is having to do that, because when you saw our numbers, I put it down there, I won't mention them, but you've got our numbers of students in quarantine, how many classes that means we're serving, utilizing itsLearning at the current moment. That is, that's a pretty significant number. So we got to have something, and we got to have something that we can rely on. And so far, I believe it's been reliable, and it does give us good feedback, and we can kind of tell who's on there, and the teachers communicate back and forth through it. So the key is getting everyone, all stakeholders, to have a value of the importance of these kids working when they're not able to be there with us. We know in the classroom that's what we're all trained for the kids to be in our school every day. But we also know that that's not possible right now. So have to embrace what we have and make sure we're making the best of every moment, because it is challenging. It's tough times, but can't talk enough about my teachers, how hard they're working, trying to make sure our kids are served. And so hopefully it's making a difference, and we can get to a point soon that we don't have to rely on something like this. But for now, I know we do. So any questions you guys have for me?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I have talked to teachers at various schools around the county, and I would like to just say thank you to all of you. I know all of our teachers are working very hard, and I appreciate what you do. I did not have to teach during a COVID situation, but I know what it's like to work hard in the classroom and have to juggle new programs while you're trying to teach. And I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate the hard work you're doing. What I'd like to ask you specifically, sir, is what can we do to help you? Is there something specifically that is needed? I heard you talk about peer training that other teachers can help. I mean, that's something that's your business, and you're within your school. Is there anything that the board can do to help in this situation?
Yeah, thank you. I think for us, I probably could do a better job of driving it from the top down and making sure that teachers know that our expectation is that we have to make time to ensure every student is comfortable with it. Because sometimes it's easy just to say, well, I couldn't find this, or I didn't know, or whatever. And a lot of times with our kids, they're at home by themselves, dealing with this, and they're not, because they can be left by themselves. So sometimes that's an easy excuse. And so it's hard to disseminate between what's an excuse and what's a valid, complaint or argument or situation where we need to improve. So I think to answer your question, probably we just need to make time for it. Like I said, we're just constantly against that clock and making sure we have time to get all our content in. And of course, we're planning on is everything being, high stakes testing, all that in place. So teachers have that in the back of their mind, I think, and we just have to balance and make sure we can make time for it. But I do think we probably need to spend a little bit more time training the students and the teachers. And we have certainly capable people in our building that can do that, really take into this and take time out of their day to do so. So no, I just appreciate the fact that you guys have helped make a way for us to have a program, because no program is not an option. I mean, this is the world we live in, and so I greatly appreciate that we have that, because I know there's some systems that have tried to get by with, without, and it just isn't, there's no way, in my opinion, to do so, and you kind of get what you pay for. So if it's free, sometimes you miss some things that you don't get otherwise. So appreciate you guys supporting that. But no, I just appreciate what you guys are doing to encourage our teachers and make sure they know that we got their backs, and I think they feel that way. And we just trying to keep morale up and make sure they know the work they're doing is very important. and that it's necessary, and that we will get to the other side of this at some point. So trying to give them hope for that, and I keep telling them that. I hope they believe me, continue to believe me, because I've been saying that for a while. But we're all in this together, and it takes a community of everyone, all stakeholders working together to make it go as effectively and efficiently as possible. So that's what we need, especially from home, and especially from the administration. At my school, it's what I preach to my administrators. We're there to support them, and you guys are there to support us, county office, supporting what we do. Superintendent, it's a concerted team effort, and it takes all of us. So as long as we're doing that and doing our best, keeping them at the forefront, then I think we will be successful.
I think so, and in addition to the appreciation we feel for the students and the teachers, we appreciate the parents. This is difficult on the parents when they have to work. Missing work is just not an option sometimes. They don't have that luxury. And it is difficult to try to juggle that and come home and do the things they have to do in the evening and have other siblings other children they have to help with. But I'm very appreciative that we do have this platform. Back when I had to do homework, with the chisel and a stone, missing school for a week, it was like, oh, I have to go back to school and I have all this work I have to catch up with. So I think students don't appreciate what they have really sometimes, that they have this program that they can keep up with and not have to face that much homework when they return. So
Yes, ma'am.
that's good too. Well, thank you very much.
Yes. Anybody else? Good.
I have a few questions unrelated to itsLearning. It may be questions for you and/or Ms. Smith. Recently popped up, really something I hadn't even thought about, the dual enrollment students at the high school and how that's working with Ctae during these quarantines and things like that. If a class or students get quarantined at Ctae and they're dual enrolled, or are they communicating that to us and then we quarantine them from the high school? Is there a lapse there at times and we got people coming that are,
Yes.
see what I'm
So
saying?
Great question. We have had both situations. We've had situations where Ctae quarantined students, and then they weren't allowed, to go to be there, and so they moved to more of an online type platform for an in-person class, and then we've had it the other way around. And so Ctae's been a great partner in that. I'm not sure about the other dual enrollment schools, as I'm not as familiar with what they do, but for Ctae, having that close line of communication, having Daniel Bell there to help bridge the gap is huge for us, because they can reach out to him, the students can go to them, the staff there at Ctae, they can reach out through him to make sure the information gets back and forth. So I'm not going to tell you it's been seamless or perfect, but for the most part that has worked pretty well. We have had to deal with those situations, and I'm sure we'll continue to. They follow fairly similar guidelines, but they have shut down at times for classes and told us, here's the situation. And sometimes it's just been the kids are, they shut down as abundance of caution, so the kids that aren't necessarily quarantined, they can't come to our school, but they just don't have that class. So they come and take their classes there, and then they go home, and instead of going to Ctae that day, they just go home. So there's a lot of different situations that we run into with that, but yeah, they've been great to work with through this process. And I think just patience and communication is the key, and having that good relationship, and having, like I said, Mr. Bell bridge the gap has been invaluable to us.
I presume when they have a quarantine or shutting down, they're going virtual as well. They're not just stopping everything.
Correct. They're continuing on because they had I believe a whole semester they didn't have anything on campus, at least here, back a few semesters ago. So they're equipped and ready. I'm not sure exactly what they use as far as their site or what platform they use, but they do have those measures in place. And so those students can't be forgotten or left behind either, because they're trying to get college credit classes and they're trying to count for their GPA and all those things. So it does add a layer of difficulty, I think, for students that never intended to have that pressure, in addition to the level of pressure for a college class in high school level, which not every student qualifies to be able to do. But the ones that take it on, most of them are pretty dedicated and are going to work through whatever challenges are presented. So I do think in the end, them having to go through these processes and these challenges will make them definitely stronger students. But it does definitely make you stay on your toes with email. Thankfully, we're in an age of technology. We have a lot of tools and resources at our disposal to be able to do that. But it is tough, but we are working through it, and we have had those situations, so, yes, sir, good question.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes, sir.
on some of the things that the teacher feedback, are there any suggestions that could be made to improve the program, make it a little more user-friendly, to maybe have more face-to-face virtual interaction?
Yeah, I think the key is mixing it up. You know, we don't have to rely just on this. I mean, they can embed a lot of things. I think one of the principals mentioned this, of being able to embed different programs or different resources within the program. This thing just provides a vehicle, is the way I kind of put it, for us to get the information, get the resources, and get the lesson to the student. Now, they are going to utilize that at all levels of various effectiveness, because either they struggle and have a challenge they can't figure out, or their effort maybe is not as well as the student next door. But I don't necessarily think we need to tweak the program as much as I think we need to tweak our approach. We have let the teachers have pretty well free reign of letting them, develop their part of it as much as possible, their landing page, and let them have the freedom to create that as they see fit for their needs, because Tommy Tatum teaching a construction class is going to look different than Dr. Damien teaching an AP calculus class. So, we don't want to get too restrictive on them and put them, everything can't be 100%, streamlined and consistent, but at the same time, having some general parameters about, okay, we do need these things here, so that when one kid goes from one class to another, it's, they know exactly what to do and where to go, and it's not searching around, because again, they have to search around and we'll look for it, the less likelihood there is that they're going to actually work hard at getting it done, because sometimes they get lost in the search process. So, those are just some things I think we could probably make better. I don't think that's the program's fault. The program lends itself to be able to make it tailor-made for whatever situation. But it can be too complicated. If you get too far in the weeds, again, the bells and whistles, more is not always better. And so that's, I think the approach that maybe we could make it a little more simplified. And then obviously try to add things as we go. But yeah, I think the program's fine. Again, you could ask 100 teachers, and you're going to get pros and cons either way. And everybody that sent me a strength, they sent weaknesses too. So they recognize that there's both. Some wanted to, some said that they prefer Google Classroom. They liked it that we had before, but some really liked this a lot better. And some said what they were looking for to another district was better, and some say this is better than that. So I mean, it's just a matter of public, of opinion and what they prefer, personal preference. So I think it's fine. I don't know that there's anything we need to ask for it to be tweaked. I'm sure that we could. Continue to investigate that more with teachers and find something they would like to see or have. But for the most part, it's not an issue of it not providing what's needed. It's an issue of making sure it's consistent so that every student can go through each class and find the same thing, because it can get complicated for them when they're seeing 4 total different approaches. So that's something I can drive from my standpoint down to make sure they're not just focused on their classes. Think about the kid having 3 other classes. So we can do a little better there, for sure.
Well, unfortunately, this is the 3rd school year that this virus has
Impacted.
it has had an effect on it. And from the outset, I didn't appreciate the state school superintendent basically throwing everything out the first year. I think it set a really horrible tone, and it's made it a challenge on all our educators to make people understand that this is, when you're virtual, this is school.
Yes.
And, I think they're understanding that now, but my goodness, that made an uphill climb for everybody.
It's challenging times, and, nobody has all the answers, of course. Again, I think we just take what we have, make it the best version that we can for Pickens County, for what our community expects, what our community will support, and make sure they know they're a partner in this. We're all on the same team. Like I like to say, we're all on the same sideline here, cheering for their kid. And so if we do that, we're going to be in fine shape. And like I said before, we don't want to rely on this forever. We hope that we get to a point where this is not something we have to rely on.
No, I pray you're correct, and I appreciate your efforts.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all,
Anybody?
administrators and teachers.
Good.
Thanks very much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
We we are blessed to have this group leading our schools. All right, our next report, Madam Chair, will be our financial update. Amy was unable to be with us, and so Miss Amanda,
Good evening.
thank you very much for stepping in.
Absolutely. So first, we're going to start going over our fund update, which Martha has pulled up on the screen for us. Our FY22 general fund, which is our Fund 100, our revenue collected through August 2021 is at 1.87%, and our expenditures are at 10.35% of the approved budgets. Scrolling on down, we have our consolidation of funds, which is our Fund 150. It reflects our expenditures and transfers to date. Please note these final transfers for the month have not yet been recorded, which it does make our current expenditure percentages appear a bit high. Our next section is our FY22 debt service, which is our Fund 200. We have no debt to report. And then next we're going to switch over to the SPLOS collections report, please. And then if we scroll on down, we'll see that our revenue for August was $606,752.71. It brings our 12-month average to $587,200.27. Our interest earned this month was $3,493.72. Now we can flip back to the fund update. Our expenditure totals for August were $102,729.10, and then our month-end SPLOS bank balance is $10,793,188.27. And then lastly, our FY22 special revenue funds. We've collected 0.27% of our budgeted revenue and expended 10.27% of our budgeted expenditures. And that's all I have for tonight. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next report is our operations and construction. Mr. Gilleland was unable to be with us this evening, and so he wrote his report up for me to read to you. So I will be speaking as Stacy as I read this, and we'll start with maintenance. COVID has hit us hard this month. We're also having a couple of our team members miss several days due to non-COVID health issues, but overall things are going good. We're looking at some additional ways to add some airflow in our concession stands. Talked to Carol Daniel about that, and hopefully we're going to be able to work out something in addition to the fans that we have in place. Update on the ag facility at the junior high. Footings will be poured Monday. Slab will be poured next Friday. Steel is scheduled to arrive the week after that. We are at a good point to have a ribbon cutting, and so I, speaking with Stacy, need the board to talk among themselves and pick out a day and time so that we can get our ribbon cutting done. We're excited about that. Transportation. COVID and sickness in general seems to be hitting us hard right now. We're still in need of sub-drivers, and we'll be holding another training class the week of October 4th through the 8th. We have 3 individuals well on their way to completing the training, which is a big plus. Food service report. School nutrition is holding steady, working with limited staff at times and unpredictable food shortages. Despite the obstacles, we are here to serve our students, and we will continue to provide breakfast and lunch at no charge to all students. Coming up in October, we will celebrate National Farm to School Month. Hill City's agricultural program will have a fresh crop of okra to share with the schools just in time to support this year's featured vegetable, Livin' La Vida Okra, designated by Georgia Organics, which is the farm to school organization that connects Georgia farmers with the community. We look forward to featuring locally grown okra fresh from the Hill City Garden to our kitchens in October.
Can we get sliced tomato questions?
Jennifer, are the tomatoes still coming in? Yes, we can do that. In the month of October, we will also celebrate National School Lunch Week, October 11th through 15th. This year's theme is Get wild about school lunch. Events and promotions for that week are still in the planning stage, but we are looking forward to showcasing what school nutrition has to offer to our students with a wholesome, well-balanced, kid-friendly menu selection within a colorful jungle animal theme. My team continues to put forth incredible effort to make sure that we are ready every day to provide our students with everything it takes to be successful in the classroom, and my hat is off to them. And I would second that. It's amazing in these difficult times what all of our staff is able to accomplish. It has not been an easy start to the school year. Principals can attest to that. Stacy has had a number of challenges as well working in his areas, but everyone continues to put forth maximum effort, and we continue to open those doors every day. And that concludes Mr. Gillen's report. Any questions? All right, next report. Speaking of someone that has had her hands full during this difficult time, our COVID status report from Gail Smith, our Director of Health Services. Ms. Smith.
Good evening. This evening I want to share some data and some research that is informing our decisions and hopefully answer some questions that a lot of our staff and families have. So I've done a very deep dive into our data and look at current research, and you had asked a very good question at the last meeting, what is the data showing? Anything worth doing is worth evaluating. We've been into the school year now, well over a month, and so it's time to reevaluate our COVID practices and see if we need to adjust anything. So what I'd like to do is first share some data and research, and then share with you what our current practices are and what our practices are as we move forward. So first and foremost, cases in children have quadrupled in the state of Georgia over the last several weeks. We know that well. We're seeing that here in our school district. And what is interesting is that the highest cases are among children are on the ages or in the ages of 11 to 17. And you will see that when I share data about the different school levels. So the data that I collected was last Friday, as of last Friday, September 2nd. The total number of cases that I'm about to share with you is from the time that staff returned on July 26th through September 2nd. We have had 1,646 cases, meaning positive, someone testing positive, suspected COVID cases, or exposures. And that involves both staff and students. We've had 316 positive cases, and that does include rapid tests, PCR tests, which are the tests that are sent off and are more reliable. By the way, DPH on their website only report the PCR test results when they're reporting the COVID cases. But when we look at our positive cases, we take into account not only the rapid test, the PCR test results, but also at-home test. The reason we started accepting at-home tests was because our families were experiencing hardship in finding places to get COVID tests. And some were incurring cost, and also coupled with that is that research was showing that at-home tests are reliable if they're done correctly. So due to the hardship of the families and what research was showing us, we began accepting at-home tests. Now, out of the 316 positive cases that we've had since July 26th, 57 of those were considered to be school transmission. The way that we calculate what is a school transmitted case versus what is a community transmitted case is that we are tracking the number of students or staff who are testing positive while in quarantine. And so we've had 57 out of 316 cases that have tested positive while in quarantine, which is 18% of those cases. Now, I do want to point out that those 57, and the superintendent made a really good point in a conversation that we had, those 57 individuals who tested positive, who were in quarantine, if we as a school district were not doing contact tracing and quarantine, would have been spreading that virus. Now 57 out of the population that we have, some would consider that's not a lot. But when you consider that the Delta variant is twice as more contagious than the Alpha variant, the original variant, that equates minimally to 342 people. 342 people have been saved minimally because of the work that all the school staff is doing to contact trace and to exclude students and staff from school that have been quarantined. That's a lot of lives being saved. We cannot project the number of lives that are being saved, but we can, through science, calculate the number of people that potentially would have been impacted by one positive case. One positive case affects 6 people. So 57 people testing positive in quarantine equates minimally to 342 people. And that's just one encounter. So maybe in one classroom, sometimes students who are positive, they're here for maybe 2 days and up to 5 days sometimes. So that number could be alarmingly larger. So I do commend this school district for doing the contact tracing and the quarantining, because this is my personal professional opinion, is that we're saving lives. And that we are protecting, and I feel like we have an obligation to protect those who cannot be vaccinated. And that right now is the age group from 5 to 12 years of age. And what we're doing in this district is protecting, saving lives, but also protecting those who cannot be vaccinated. And so, thank you for that. Also, looking at data, this is very interesting. CDC has what I discovered is a new terminology called, what is the attack rate for a given population? That just means what is the infiltration of COVID in that particular community. So I looked at all the different schools, the campuses, and I figured out what their attack rates were. What I discovered is that in the elementary schools, and first let me say this, when we look at the attack rate, what we want to compare that to, and the best thing that we have available to compare it to is what CDC calls severity threshold for flu. Meaning there is a threshold that health experts look at in a community to determine the severity of that impact on that community. For the flu, it's 3% of the population testing positive. When 3% of that population tests positive, then some mitigation needs to occur. So scientists have not yet, that I am aware of, determined what the threshold is for COVID. So until that is determined, flu, in my professional opinion, the flu threshold for severity is a good rule of thumb to use to determine is what we're doing working. And that's a big question I think that people have is, are we doing the right thing? And is what we're doing making a difference? So let me share with you what the school numbers are. So in the elementary schools, every single 3 campuses are below the threshold. In fact, Ctae Elementary was 0.61%. I say kudos to the elementary schools because there are some school districts, you see my passion about this, there are some school districts who were seeing their highest rate in the elementary grades. Now, that is opposed to what science is showing, so their rates are higher in the elementary grades. So I reached out to the individual principals and said, what are you doing that's working well? And they shared 2 things that really stood out to me that was consistent across all campuses, the elementary campuses, is that the cleaning is being done throughout the day and it's thoroughly being done at night. And then the cohorts, grouping the students, keeping them together, I think those are the 2 biggest things that are helping. And so when we look at the high school, I'm not surprised to report that their numbers are higher only because we are seeing the highest cases among children are ages, remember, 11 to 17. And so what's concerning to me is that both the junior high and the high school have higher higher than that 3% mark is that these are the students that can be vaccinated. So what are we doing in response to their campuses, these campuses being above the threshold? We have been talking about what can we do to increase the mitigation to help reduce those numbers. The biggest thing, if there are any parents listening, the biggest thing that we can do to reduce the numbers at these campuses is for the children who are 12 and up to be vaccinated. 2, mask. Masking reduces transmission. If 2 people are wearing a mask, it reduces transmission by 70%. So the biggest things we can do to mitigate and that just means to reduce the transmission of the virus on these campuses that are above that 3% threshold, is to vaccinate, to mask, and to assess what's being done and what can be done more. For the most part, the schools are implementing the same strategies from last year, except for a couple of things like the lunchroom. The kids are still in the lunchroom and in the hallways. And that's something that we're discussing. What can we do? What can we do more? I do want to pause right there for some questions. I do have some more data to share with you that's pretty significant, but at this point, do you have any questions? Okay. So another question that I've gotten from parents is, when we look at the percentage of our students who are being impacted by COVID, it's less than 5%. Some would say that that is significant, especially if they have concerns for COVID. Then there are groups that are not as concerned when you think, as a whole, there's 95% that are not being impacted. So what do you do about that? And so we know that 1 is too many, especially if it leads to hospitalization or deaths. So I looked at what is the rate of hospitalization and deaths in children as it pertains to COVID. Yes, it is increased as a whole in our nation and in our state. But in our community, we started tracking the number of hospitalizations and thankfully no deaths that have been reported. There have been 2 students hospitalized with COVID this school year and 1 employee that has been reported to the nurses. And so, although 1 is too many, that is still a low rate of hospitalizations and deaths for this particular community. So that's very encouraging. We hopefully it will be that way. And as we move forward to next steps, we will continue to keep our eye on that to make sure that's not increasing. Another very important piece of data that I want to share is how the school district is faring in comparison to the surrounding community as a whole, Pickens County. So I did see that when looking at numbers, that the number of positive cases in our school district is higher than our community. That should not be. So the response to that is, what should we do? What do we need to do? And so as a team, we're working together on the COVID POCs at all the schools to determine, particularly the principals, what can we do to bring that number down. So we've talked about that. And as we move forward, we're going to continue to watch that. But I will say this, although I always like to point out the positives, even though our numbers are higher than the community, we are still below the 3% threshold of severity. We are at 2.5% in the school district for positive cases, where in the community it's 1.79. And those numbers were pulled on Friday as well, September 2nd. And that was not just looking at a daily case rate, that was looking at a trend over 7 days and 14 days. The numbers that I just quoted you were from a 14-day trend. So although our case count is higher in our district, we are still lower than that 3% threshold, which is good. I'm going to continue to watch that and make sure that we stay under that. And so that's the numbers that I have to share with you today. I did look at projections so we can work ahead of the curve. You know, what is expected over the next weeks and months. And there are varying reports about that. CDC, I did confirm today, does expect to see a slight decline in the next few weeks. But then October, we're going to begin going into flu season. We will not peak flu season until December, from December to February. But all experts do agree that we expect for COVID to parallel the increase that we normally see in flu season. I will also say that the nurses are still sending in reports from what they're seeing in the clinics from the first month while being in school this year. And so I don't have the complete numbers to report to you today, but I can say that the number of students being seen in the clinic are very high volume, and they are equivalent to what we typically see during flu season. And what I like to say, what I really believe that not only for the nurses, but for the school staff right now, trying to manage COVID in addition to the normal responsibilities, it is equivalent to them sprinting in a marathon. And so hopefully with some plans that we have to help reduce the burden on the staff, like making some of our processes electronic as opposed to manual labor, that'll help reduce the volume on them, since we are running a marathon and they can't keep that pace up at a sprint speed. So we are not only looking at data, we're looking at feedback from parents. We really do give thought to the calls that we receive and the concerns from staff and families. But so hopefully together, I like what was said earlier, is that together, working together, we can make a difference and help reduce the spread. But also, I always like to remind myself of what we all are here for, and that is to, number one, keep the kids safe, and we're doing that, and to create a healthy learning environment. And the whole school community is working very hard at trying to do that, and that is our overall goal and aim, to not only keep kids safe, but to create that safe learning environment so they can have academic and lifelong success. Any questions?
You were talking about running the marathon. Do you need some more help? Is there something else that we can do to help you?
I really appreciate you asking that, and not only for myself, but I did let the superintendent and Mr. Gilleland, who I report to, know that when the cases were increasing positive cases were increasing from a daily count from 30 to 50, I said, okay, we're starting to drop some plates, meaning there's some areas that need to be improved upon. And so I did let them know that if the case count increased, we're going to need some additional support. And when I reached out to the principals and asked, and the school nurses, this is hard, what support do you need? The reply was human resources, additional staffing to help manage. And I realized that comes at a cost. So we also looked at what can we do to ease the burden off of staff. So I've released some of the nurses from the burden of things that were not as a higher priority. And and I'm not going to go into detail today, but I did just evaluate what is the highest priority, what can we postpone. And one of the things that even the health department helped do is to postpone an audit that they were doing for immunizations, postponing that till January. So that's a big responsibility for the nurses the first part of the year, and so that burden was postponed for them. For me, personally, I think as a team it's very helpful for everyone to share the load. I do think also that additional support staff would be helpful to better manage the cases and to keep better communications with the families when it comes to their return dates. And so that the schools know who's returning when, and the parents stay well informed. And I had a talk with Dr. Flatt earlier in the week, and he mentioned something that was very insightful for me. He worded it very well, is that we are spending so much time managing that we don't have time to be proactive. And me personally, I love to educate the families. I love to put resources together, and there's no time to be proactive when we're so busy managing. So if additional support was available, it would allow us to be more proactive and tend to the duties of our normal operating procedures, where COVID is just consuming our day and time. Thank you. Any other questions?
We appreciate the work you're doing and all your staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nurse Smith. Madam Chair, that concludes my reports.
All right. The next action item is the approval of the financial reports. Do I have a motion to approve the financial reports that were presented?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Gartrell made the motion, Mr. Smith seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the vote is 5-0, the motion passes unanimously. The next action item is approval of personnel. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel action report as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Green made the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Smith seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0. The PAR is approved as presented. The next item is the approval of policy Gbia, the teacher evaluation appeals. Mr. Young, I believe this policy was placed out for public comment last month at our regular board meeting. Have we had any public input on this policy?
We have not, Madam Chair.
Do I have a motion to approve the revision of policy Gbia, teacher evaluation appeals, which has been out for public review since August 12th, 2021, as presented?
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Mr. Gartrell has made that motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Green has seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the vote is 5-0. Motion has been approved. The approval of policy GAE, complaints and grievances. I believe this policy was also placed out for public review at the August 12th regular board meeting. Have we had any public comment on this policy, Mr. Young?
No, Madam Chair, we have not.
Do I have a motion to approve the revision of policy GAE, complaints and grievances, which has been out for public review since August 12th, 2021, as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Smith has made the motion. Mr. Gartrell has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote is 5-0. Vote is unanimous and passes unanimously. The approval of FY22 local board training plan is the next item on the list. State law and state board rules require the school board members to obtain board governance training each year. Mr. Young, would you briefly discuss the proposed FY22 local board training plan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Each year, local boards of education are required by state law and state board rule to submit to the Georgia Department of Education a training plan that will meet mandated hours of training as prescribed by the Georgia School Board Association. Martha has put together a plan that you can see up on the screen there that will meet the requirements that will cover your hourly requirements for the upcoming year. And with the board's approval, she will submit that. It is not carved in stone. As you can see, one of the things that we have talked about attending is a legal issues workshop in December. That may not be possible. Nurse Smith, as she reported earlier, is not certain of what the future holds by the time we get to December. We do know that the training part of that will be available virtually, and so if we have to do that training virtually, we can. You can see that the second is to be announced. That will be established by the board based on board schedules and when they are available to get together. These are not carved in stone. If we are unable to meet either of those, we can't, for whatever reason, make it to the legal issues workshop, for example, we are able to reschedule another training either through GSBA or through RESA. But for Martha's sake, she needs us to approve a training regimen so that she can get that submitted and just check that box. So I'm asking for approval from the board this evening for that.
All right.
I'll make a motion that we approve the training schedule, tentative training schedule after this.
All right, Mr. Gartrell, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Smith, seconded. Is there any further discussion? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The vote is 5-0. The next item is approval of the FY22 lease agreement with Mountain Education Center. Mr. Young, do you have some information on this lease agreement?
I do, Madam Chair. I am asking for board approval of the lease with Mountain Ed for the part of the old high school that they now occupy. There have been no changes to the agreement from last year. MEC provides tremendous opportunity to students in our area that for whatever reason do not prefer a traditional high school setting such as we offer at PHS. In exchange for the use of the building, we receive $50,000 from Mountain Ed each year in lease, and they provide a tremendous service to us. So tonight I'm asking for the board to approve the renewal of this lease with Mountain Education Center.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the FY22 lease agreement with Mountain Education Center as presented?
I'll make that motion.
All right, thank you. Mr. Green makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Smith seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
I will abstain.
Okay. The vote is 4-0 with 1 abstention. The next item is the approval of Reinhardt University Educational Pathway Articulation Agreement. Mr. Young, would you give us some information on this request, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be glad to. I'm excited tonight to ask the board for approval of this agreement with Reinhardt University. I've spoken to the board members on occasion about this. Dr. Roberts was very kind in working with me to make this possible. Reinhardt has agreed to grant all employees of the Pickens County School District a 15% tuition discount for any graduate programs in the Price School of Education that they choose to take. This includes a 15% discount in their Master of Arts in Teaching in Elementary Education degree, which is available to our paraprofessionals. As long as they remain in our employ, they will receive a 15% discount on those courses. If they create a cohort of 13 or more, they will receive a 20% discount in the taking of those classes. So this truly can be a life-changing opportunity for some of the people that work with us in the Pickens County School District. It's also a great way for those parapros that decide they love the pathway of education to move forward into that and receive a Master of Art in Teaching, and we would more than gladly give them a job. There's always a shortage of teachers. So we are very excited about this opportunity for all of our employees, but especially for our parapros who are interested in becoming teachers. So a big shout out goes to Reinhardt, and so this evening I am asking that the board approve this educational pathway articulation agreement, which by the way is at no cost to the district.
Well, I certainly want to thank Reinhardt University for this opportunity. It is a tremendous opportunity for many of our employees, and I hope they'll take advantage of it. Do I have a motion to approve the Reinhardt University Educational Pathway Articulation Agreement as presented?
As a 1990 graduate of Reinhardt Junior College at that time, I'll make that motion.
Well, we won't hold that against Reinhardt, and we will accept your motion. Thank you, Mr. Gartrell.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Green, for the second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 5-0. Thank you very much. The next item is the approval of the 21-22 sex education curriculum for Pickens High School. Mr. Young, do you have any information for us on this item?
I do, Madam Chair. As the board knows, and for those of you that have been on here for more than this year, you have voted for this in the past. We are required by Georgia Code to establish a sex education / AIDS education committee made up of members of the community. And it's the responsibility of that group to determine the curriculum for our high school for this school year in relation to sex education. The committee met, thanks to Miss Anita for taking care of that. There she is. The committee met and voted to continue to use the grad point health lessons that we have used in the past to satisfy the state requirements. The committee further voted to work with public health officials to provide additional information as well to our students. And so that will be an ongoing process. Please note, before the vote, parents are able to choose whether or not their children will participate in any of these lessons, and they are able to opt out of that participation. But we have met the requirements of Georgia Code with the committee and their decision. So this evening I'm asking for board approval of this year's sex ed curriculum for the high school.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Young, is there any changes whatsoever to the base?
To the grad point. Anita, there was absolutely, I haven't looked at every single lesson, but no changes from last year's curriculum.
No changes to grad point. The only change would be with the certified health officials. And the students have the opportunity, or the parents, to opt their child out of the grad point program. And there's certain lessons within grad point that meet the sex ed AIDS standards, so they just opt out of those particular lessons. But then the parents will have to opt in to the speakers that we have, the certified health officials. So that won't just be, oh, I didn't know my child had this. They will have to actually sign a note that says my child may participate with this speaker. And there will be kind of an outline of what the speaker will be going over. And they will have to meet with the teacher prior, or at least have an agenda, so the teacher will know what's going to be in the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the 2021-2022 sex education curriculum for Pickens High School, stipulating that parents will have the opportunity to choose whether their child participates in these lessons?
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
All right, Mr. Gartrell has made the motion to accept that. Do I hear a second? I'll second the motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion is 5-0. And that motion passes unanimously. The next item is the approval of the FY22 Ctae local plan. Mr. Baston is here tonight with a short presentation on the FY22 Ctae local plan.
Good evening. I'm going to try to jump ahead as quickly as I can. I know we've been here for quite a while. In April, May, somewhere around there, I'm required every year to apply for various grants for Ctae. We find out in July whether or not we get those grants and how much we get, and then I'm required to present to you to let you know what those grants were, how they're supposed to be spent, how we plan on spending them, and then you get to approve or not approve, and we'll make changes based on your recommendation. If we can go ahead and jump all the way to the Perkins Plus grant. Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, Perkins Plus. Basically, this grant helps us to pay for our end of pathway assessments, which is when a student completes 3 classes in a pathway, they take this assessment. Once they've passed those 3 classes, they are pathway completers. The assessment is just for industry certification or some kind of a credential. So as you can see, we received $9,487. Basically, that's just to pay for materials and for the testing. We have to actually buy each test based on the number of students that are testing. So that's how that is used. Our program improvement, that's our largest grant. This year it's $39,707. That has to be used for either equipment to improve our programs or for travel for our teachers to attend professional development, to travel with our students, to go to conferences, that sort of thing. Usually every year we spend most of that money on travel. Those of you who are familiar with ag, they travel all over the state all the time. So we use a big chunk of that, but because of COVID, the past few years, because we haven't traveled as much, we've been able to buy some equipment with that. So currently we plan on buying some equipment for our ag mechanics classroom and then the travel and that sort of thing. At the end of the year, if we have not traveled as much as we thought, then we'll go back and we'll buy some more equipment. Ag extended day, that's basically money to pay for our ag teachers. They get paid 1 additional hour each day to complete their program of work. And then the ag extended year, they get paid for 40 additional work days because they have to come in the summertime, take care of animals and travel and do all sorts of things throughout the summer. So that's just money to help us offset that. Our Young Farmer is new this year. We received the Young Farmers Grant. That $58,878 goes toward paying for our Young Farmer teacher, which is Jason Cantrell. Basically, we pay that amount and the state pays about 70% of the cost of having him. It's a grant that the state actually puts in their budget and approves every year.
When we get that grant, how long is the time on that?
Each year it will be renewed.
It does have to
Once
be
we
renewed.
get it though, it's in that, it's in the budget then.
But it does have to have annual renewal.
Right, right. Our apprenticeship grant, that helps to pay for our apprenticeship coordinator. Obviously, it doesn't cover all of her salary, but it just helps offset that cost. Our extended day, same as for ag, our regular CTAE teachers are required to be in CTSOs, which is Career Technical Student Organizations, which requires several additional hours each day, but we're able to pay for them. Each year, there's a lump sum of money that the state has, and then based on how many teachers apply for extended day, that's how it gets divided up. It could be the state pays 60% of the extended day, or it could be 40% based on how many people apply. It's just how much it gets divided up. As you can see, we received $15,297. Supervision grant, I appreciate that. That goes toward my salary, helping to pay for me to be there at the school. I'm required to spend at least 50% of my time doing CTAE stuff, taking care of whatever needs to be taken care of with CTAE. Then the other half of my day, I'm the assistant principal or an assistant principal. Those are our pathways. The only change is we no longer have the criminal justice pathway. By the numbers, we have 12 instructors, 10 clusters, which is 10 areas like ag or construction or whatever. In those clusters, we have 15 different pathways. We offer 40 classes this semester. We serve 990 students. And if you're familiar with our high school, that's a big chunk of our high school is in CTAE. We've had 50 students in work-based learning and youth apprenticeship, and we had 274 pathway completers, and 139 of them took that test and passed. Any questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Basin.
Thank you for all your help.
Awesome. So this evening, Madam Chair, I would ask for the board's approval of the FY22 CTAE local plan.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the FY22 CTAE local plan as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Smith has made the motion, Mr. Gartrell has seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. A lot of young people are helped by this program. The next item is we have a memorandum of agreement with Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College. Mr. Young, do you have any comments on this MOU?
Yes, Madam Chair. I am excited tonight to bring this MOU before the board that will give us access to student teachers from Abraham Baldwin. And they reached out to me about 3 weeks ago and asked if we would be willing, they heard good things about our program, and asked if we would be willing to open it up to their student teachers, and I told them absolutely. As I told you with prior MOUs, that gives us access to these people. This opens the door to us to recruit from those that end up being very good candidates. So we are always more than happy to enter into these MOUs, but I do need board approval this evening, Madam Chair.
All right.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve this.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gartrell.
I'll second it.
And Mr. Smith seconds. I would like to say, Mr. Young, I think it's a compliment to you and to our staff that they have reached out to us. I'm very proud of our agricultural program, but it's nice that they have heard good things about us and reached out as well.
Absolutely.
Is there any further discussion?
It'd be even more exciting to join us when these new facilities are finished too. But we
That's
do
true.
have wonderful ag staff, seasoned staff with a great deal of experience and dedication to the community.
That's true. Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the vote is 5-0, passes unanimously. The next item is request for approval of memorandum of understanding and contract with 9th District Opportunity Incorporated. Mr. Young, do you have a brief description of this MOU?
I do, Madam Chair. I'm asking for board approval of the annual MOU with 9th District Opportunity Incorporated, which is an odd sounding name, but this is something that our boards have been approving since probably the 1970s. This is the MOU of agreement between us and the Head Start Pre-K program that everyone is so familiar with, that has benefited countless children in Pickens County for a long time. We will continue to act as their fiscal agent, and will continue to provide them in-kind exchange of goods in the form of the building out of which they operate. And so I'm asking for the board to approve this renewal of contract. Doesn't cost us anything in terms of expense to the board other than we provide them the building and take care of maintenance there. And we are their fiscal agent, but they reimburse us for that. So I'm asking for board approval this evening.
All right. Thank you.
I move we approve.
All right, thank you, Mr. Green.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Green, for making the motion to approve the MOU and contract with 9th District Opportunity. And thank you, Mr. Gartrell, for seconding that motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 5-0. Thank you very much. The next item is the request for approval of service agreement with Advanced Care Partners, LLC. Mr. Young, may we have a bit of information on this item?
Yes, ma'am. Occasionally we experience a situation where we have to go outside of our staff to get expertise in certain areas, and this is an example of that. We are in need of a nurse for one of our students, a full-time nurse for one of our students that has significant needs, and so we've entered into this, with board's approval, this contract with Advanced Care Partners to provide that service to the student so that we can get that person into our building and take care of them each day. And so that's why I'm asking for approval of this contract.
Okay, great. Do I have a motion to approve the service agreement with Advanced Care Partners, LLC?
Make that motion.
All right, Mr. Green,
Second.
second from Mr. Smith. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 5-0. Thank you very much. The next item is the approval of the MOU with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. Mr. Young, can you give us information on this MOU, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. This MOU establishes the process by which the Pickens County School District will continue to move forward with implementation of the Growing Readers Program in our schools. The Governor's Office of Student Achievement will be responsible for collecting and analyzing our data as we continue to train and implement the Growing Readers Program so that we can ensure that efficacy of implementation is being accomplished. And so it is important that we take care of that, and the GOSA, as it's known, will assist us in making sure that we are doing it appropriately and we are accomplishing what we hope to accomplish with growing readers. There is no expense to the district. It's simply us sharing our data with them and them analyzing that data to make sure that we are implementing the program appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the MOU with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Smith has made the motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Mr. Gartrell has made the second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote is 5-0. Motion is approved. The next item is approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 12th, 2021 called meeting, which was at 5 p.m., the August 12th, 2021 regular meeting, which was at 6 p.m., the August 18th, 2021 called board meeting at 5 p.m., and the August 30th, 2021 called board meeting at 2 p.m.
So moved.
Mr. Green has made the motion. Mr. Gartrell has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 5-0. The motion passes unanimously. The next item is approval of surplus. Do I have a motion to approve the surplus submitted by Jasper Middle School, Pickens High School Media, and the Special Ed Department?
I'll make the motion.
I believe these requests include outdated and damaged library books and various other equipment no longer in use. Motion has been made by Mr. Smith,
I'll second.
and Mr. Gartrell has made the second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 5-0. It is passed unanimously. The next item is board comments. Do we have any board members that would like to make any comments? All right.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to again thank our staff and the parents for helping to get our kids to school, having to take care of them, having to educate them at an extremely trying time, and we don't know how much longer this is going to last, how much more severe it's going to be. But I do thank all of you so very much for your efforts.
All right. That's an amen from the rest of us, I'm sure. We do appreciate everyone's efforts. The next item is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Let's put Mr. Holland down for that one. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Do I hear a second?
Already did.
Oh, Mr. Gartrell, okay. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
5-0, we are adjourned at 7:40 PM. Thank you so much.
Mr. Holland.